My name is Kaytlyn Johnson. I am 38 years old. For 10 years, I thought I had a solid marriage, a home, a future, a partner I could trust. But then, one day, everything ended with a single text from my husband. He left me for someone half my age, and he thought I would collapse. What he never knew was that I had already prepared, and that my story would not be one of defeat, but of strength, success, and revenge. 10 years. That is how long I have been married to Liam. A decade of shared mornings, of dinners at the same table, of vacations filled with laughter and photographs where our smiles looked real. I believed in us. I believed in him. But lately, something has shifted. At first, it was small. He started coming home late from work. "Just a project that needs extra hours," he said. And I wanted to believe him. I told myself that maybe he was working hard for us, for the future we had planned. But then it happened again, and again. Nights where I sat alone, the clock ticking, the food growing cold, my eyes staring at the door. I tried to smile when he finally walked in, but in my chest, a tightness was growing. One evening, I asked him softly, "Why so late?" He looked away, his hand tightening around his phone. "Deadlines, clients, you know how it is." Then he kissed my cheek and went straight to the shower. I stood in the kitchen, listening to the water running, and I thought, he used to tell me everything. Now, silence. The phone became another wall between us. He used to leave it lying around, screen lighting up with harmless notifications. But now, it was always face down, always locked, and the password, the one I used to know, had been changed. I noticed the way he guarded it. If I walked too close, he would tilt the screen away. If it buzzed, his eyes darted toward it, as if protecting a secret. Sometimes he even took calls on the balcony in a hushed voice, the kind of tone he never used with me. Once, when I passed by, I heard a soft laugh, a laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in months. And in that moment, I felt something sharp pierce through me, a suspicion I didn't want to name. The money was next. Strange transactions, receipts stuffed carelessly into his jacket pockets, dinners at places we never went to together, hotels I had never heard of. One credit card bill showed flowers ordered online, but I never received them. When I held one of the receipts in my hand, my fingers trembled. I wanted to believe it was nothing, a business meeting perhaps. But deep down, I knew better. I told myself to stay calm, to watch, to listen. I had always trusted my intuition, and now it was screaming at me. Some nights when he was asleep, I lay awake beside him, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. I stared at the ceiling and whispered into the dark, "Don't let it be true. Please, don't let it be true." But the signs kept coming, like cracks in a wall that no longer holds steady. He stopped asking me about my day, stopped laughing at my silly jokes, stopped reaching for my hand in the car the way he used to do without thinking. Instead, there was distance, a curtain falling between us. And yet, I stayed quiet. I smiled when I had to. I nodded when he offered excuses. Inside, my heart was unraveling. But my mind was preparing. One evening, I watched him walk out the door with his tie slightly loosened, phone in his hand, keys jangling with restless urgency. I whispered after him, though he could not hear, "Who are you rushing to?" When he didn't answer my calls later that night, I sat by the window, the glow of the streetlights spilling into the room. I held a glass of wine in my hand, untouched. The silence of the house wrapped around me like a cruel companion, and I thought of the life we had built together, the promises, the dreams, and I wondered, at what moment had it started to fall apart? There were moments when anger tried to break through, burning in my chest, but more often it was sadness, a heavy, unshakable sadness that made my body feel like stone. Still, I breathed. Still, I endured. Because I knew if my suspicions were right, I had to be ready. I remember one particular night when he slipped into bed hours past midnight. The sheets were cold when he lay down beside me. I turned slightly and whispered, "I miss you." He didn't answer. He only pretended to sleep. That silence told me more than any confession ever could. I closed my eyes, my body trembling, but my mind was sharp. The Kaytlyn he once knew might have been naive, but the woman I was becoming was watchful, careful, quietly preparing for the storm I could already feel gathering on the horizon, and even in the darkness I promised myself I would not be destroyed by this. There comes a moment when intuition is no longer a whisper, but a steady voice that refuses to be ignored. I had felt it for weeks, like a shadow at the edge of my vision, a warning, a quiet pulse in my chest saying, "Be ready." I could have confronted him. I could have shouted, demanded answers, torn the curtain down with fury, but something inside me said, "No, not yet. Not until I was certain, and not until I had secured what was mine." So one morning, while Liam left for work in his perfectly pressed suit, I slipped into my own role, the role of a woman who smiles, who plays along, who pretends she is still blind. But the truth was, I had already begun my preparations. I remember walking into the bank, the cold air, the quiet hum of machines, the faint scent of paper and ink. I asked for a private meeting. My voice was calm, steady, though my hands trembled slightly on the polished wood of the desk. The banker looked at me kindly and said, "How may I help you today?" And I answered with a small smile, "I'd like to open a new account, just for me." The words felt heavier than they should have, like a secret being born, like a line being drawn. I transferred everything, every dollar I had carefully saved, every coin that represented years of work, of sacrifice, of building a future I thought we would share. I moved it all into that account, and I left only a fraction behind, enough so that Liam would not notice, enough so that the illusion of normalcy could remain intact. When the papers were signed, when the banker handed me the folder with my new details, I held it like a weapon disguised as paper. And in that moment, I whispered to myself, I knew this day would come. I carried the secret home with me. I walked into the house, into the kitchen where Liam sometimes left his coffee mug, into the living room where his jacket hung carelessly on the chair. I smiled when he called me later that night. I laughed at his stories even when I knew they were lies, because the game was already in motion, and he didn't even know he was playing. There were nights when I stood in front of the mirror, brushing my hair, watching my own reflection with a stillness I had never seen before. I was not the same woman who had once trusted blindly. I was becoming someone sharper, someone who could hide her pain behind a smile. Sometimes, when Liam came home late, I would greet him at the door. I would ask, "How was work?" And he would sigh, loosen his tie, and mutter, "Exhausting. Meetings all day." I would nod, kiss his cheek, and turn away before he could see the flicker in my eyes. Inside, my heart whispered, I know more than you think." But I never let him see the truth. That was my strength. That was my shield. Each morning I rose early, made coffee, and set the table as though life was untouched. I packed his lunch. I kissed him goodbye. I let him believe I was still the devoted wife waiting at home. And yet, in my chest, there was a quiet power growing. Because I had already secured the one thing he could never take from me, my independence. The money was not just money. It was safety. It was proof that I would survive whatever storm was coming. Sometimes, as I drifted to sleep beside him, I whispered words he would never hear. "You think I am blind, Liam. You think I am weak. But you are wrong. I am watching. I am waiting. And the silence of those nights became my training ground, a place where I learned patience, where I learned that revenge is not born in chaos, but in preparation. I began to notice everything, the way he glanced at his phone and smiled at messages I would never see, the way he hummed to himself when he thought of something pleasing, the sudden care he took with his appearance, the faint trace of cologne that lingered longer than usual. I cataloged it all, each sign, each detail, filing it away not as a wounded wife, but as a strategist. And through it all, I smiled. I laughed when he told jokes. I asked about his day. I let him believe that I was still his, still loyal, still waiting. But the truth lived beneath my skin like fire. I was no longer just his wife. I was my own protector. And when the moment came, when his betrayal finally showed its full face, I would be ready. So I lived each day as if nothing was wrong. I served dinner. I folded laundry. I lay beside him at night. But my heart was already building walls he could never break. And every time I looked at him, every time I heard another excuse, I whispered silently to myself, I knew this day would come, and I will not be the one who falls. It was late afternoon, the kind of hour when the light turns soft and golden, slipping through the curtains in long, quiet streaks. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea that had already grown cold, my mind drifting between thoughts of work and the silent weight that had lived in our house for months. Then, my phone buzzed. A simple vibration. So ordinary. And yet, as I reached for it, my heart knew this was the moment I had been waiting for. I looked down. It was from Liam. His words appeared in sharp black letters across the glowing screen. He didn't call me. He didn't face me. He sent a message, as if our 10 years together deserved nothing more. The message said he wanted a divorce, and not only that. He wrote with a kind of arrogance, as though he were proud of it, proud to tell me he was leaving, proud to flaunt his new life. He said he was moving to Miami. He said he had already made plans, and he said he would be with her, with Mia. I read it once, then again. The words were simple, but each one cut like glass. I waited for the pain to rise, for the tears to sting my eyes. But they didn't. Instead, something else came. A stillness, a silence so deep it almost felt like calm. I sat back in the chair, holding the phone loosely in my hand. I thought of Liam, typing those words with a smirk on his face. I imagined him feeling clever, feeling free, feeling untouchable, and then I smiled. Not the smile of a broken woman, not the smile of someone defeated, but the smile of a woman who had seen this moment long before it arrived. I whispered softly to myself, so it's finally here. For a long time, I simply sat there, listening to the tick of the clock on the wall, the faint hum of traffic outside, the ordinary sounds of life carrying on. And I realized my life was not ending. It was beginning again. I read his message once more, my eyes lingering on her name. Mia, 20 years old. The girl he thought was worth more than a decade of marriage. I felt no envy, no desire to compare myself to her, because I knew what he did not. I knew that youth fades, but character endures. And I knew that his betrayal said more about him than it ever did about me. I placed the phone on the table. My hands no longer trembled. My breath was steady. I thought of the account I had opened, the money safely tucked away, the steps I had already taken, and I understood. This was not his victory. This was mine. Later, when he would expect me to crumble, when he would expect tears and pleading, he would be met with something else entirely. Composure, clarity, and strength. For now, I let the silence wrap around me like a cloak. I lifted the cup of cold tea, took a sip, and almost laughed at the bitterness. I could hear his voice in my head, boasting in that message. "We'll be in Miami, the sun, the ocean, finally living." And in my imagination, I answered him. "Go ahead, Liam. Run, chase the illusion. But remember, you cannot escape the truth." When the sun dipped lower, painting the walls in deeper shades of gold, I rose from the chair. I placed the phone aside, as though it were nothing more than another piece of useless paper, and I felt lighter, stronger, because in that moment, the last thread of hope between us was cut, not by me, but by his own careless hand. And when he severed it, he set me free. I looked into the mirror in the hallway as I passed. My reflection stared back, calm and unwavering, and I told her quietly, "You will not cry. You will not break. You will rise." And then, with a faint smile still lingering at the corners of my mouth, I walked into the living room, turned on the lamp, and began to plan. The moment I read his message, something inside me hardened. 10 years of my life reduced to a handful of arrogant words, a marriage discarded by text, and worse, a man so proud of his betrayal that he boasted about his escape, about the girl on his arm, about the life he thought he would start without me. But he was wrong. He thought I was still the woman who trusted, who waited, who believed. He didn't realize I had been preparing for this moment all along, and now it was my turn to strike. I didn't answer him. I didn't cry. I picked up the phone, but not for him. I dialed the bank instead. My voice, when the operator answered, was calm, unnervingly calm. "Hello," I said softly. "I need to report fraudulent activity on my account." I gave her the details. Each transaction, each charge, each hotel booking and airline ticket. My words were sharp, deliberate, like arrows hitting their target. She listened, polite and professional, typing into her system. I could hear the faint clicking of keys, like a clock counting down to his ruin. "Don't worry, ma'am," she said. "We'll cancel those transactions right away. The card has been disabled. Any attempt to use it will be declined immediately." I closed my eyes. I let the silence stretch. And then I whispered, almost to myself, "Perfect." It wasn't just about the money. It was about the timing. I knew exactly where he was, what he was doing, how he thought his night would unfold. He and Mia would already be on their way to the airport, buzzing with anticipation. They would be laughing, maybe even toasting their new beginning. And then everything would collapse. I pictured the moment vividly, the airline counter, his smug expression as he handed over the card, Mia clinging to him, her eyes shining with excitement, and then the screen flashing red. Declined, the attendant looking politely confused. "I'm sorry, sir, this card isn't working." At first, he would laugh it off. "Run it again." "It's fine." But it wouldn't be fine, not the second time, not the third. I could hear Mia's voice already, sharp as glass. "What do you mean? You told me everything was paid for." And Liam, fumbling, angry, his face growing red. "It's a mistake. Just give me a second. I'll fix it." But there would be no fixing. I had made sure of that. I didn't stop with the card. I called again, this time asking for a fraud hold on the joint account he had drained. I explained that my husband had acted without consent, that suspicious withdrawals had been made. The bank agreed to investigate, to lock the funds until further review. His supposed nest egg, frozen. And so, when he reached for that account to cover the embarrassment, he would find nothing but silence. Doors slamming shut, one after another. Every escape route blocked. I stood by the window as I imagined them stranded. The glamorous escape to Miami gone. No beachfront hotel, no cocktails under the sun. Instead, a dingy roadside motel near the airport, the smell of mildew in the air, neon lights flickering outside the window, a single bed with sheets that felt like sandpaper, That was the future he had chosen, not a paradise. A cage of his own making. And the best part was this: it wasn't just chance. It wasn't just fate. It was me. Every step had been calculated, every move precise. I had smiled, played the role of the obedient wife, hidden my suspicions behind soft eyes, and practiced words. All the while, I was building this moment. "You thought I was blind," I whispered into the empty room. "You thought I would never see. But I saw everything, Liam. And now you're the one in the dark." I poured myself a glass of wine, my hand steady, my lips curving into a quiet smile. The silence of the house felt different tonight. Not heavy, not lonely, but powerful. I raised the glass toward the shadows. "To survival," I said. "To preparation." And then, with a sharper edge, "to revenge." I took a slow sip, savoring not the bitterness of the wine, but the sweetness of victory, because this was more than a single strike. This was the beginning of his unraveling. He thought he had stolen everything from me, my trust, my marriage, my stability. But I had taken back the only thing that mattered: control. And with that control, I would not just survive him. I would destroy the illusion he had built, piece by piece, until he was left with nothing but regret. As I set the glass down, I felt the certainty settle deep inside me. This was no accident. This was no reaction. This was my plan, unfolding exactly as I had intended. And somewhere, in a shabby motel far from the life he promised, Liam was learning a lesson he would never forget. That night, as I slid beneath the covers, I whispered one last promise to myself. This is only the beginning. He took the first shot, but I will end the war. And for the first time in a long time, I slept peacefully. The day of the hearing arrived faster than I had expected. When my lawyer called and said the court had approved an emergency session, my heart raced, not with fear, but with anticipation. This was it. The moment when everything he thought he controlled would come crashing down. I sat in the courtroom, my back straight, my hands folded neatly in my lap. The air was heavy, thick with tension, the kind that makes every whisper echo louder than it should. Across the room, Liam sat with his attorney, his jaw tight, his eyes darting everywhere but mine. He looked smaller than I remembered, diminished somehow. And Mia, she was nowhere to be seen. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. I felt my pulse quicken, but I kept my expression calm. I had nothing to fear, because I had prepared for this. My lawyer rose first. He adjusted his tie, gathered his papers, and spoke with a calm authority that filled the room. "Your Honor, we have evidence of fraudulent activity committed by Mr. Liam against the joint accounts he shared with my client, Kaytlyn." He lifted the printed pages, receipts, screenshots, bank statements. But the crown jewel was the message, the very message Liam had sent me, the one where he had bragged about draining the account, the one where he had confessed without even realizing it. My lawyer's voice was steady. "In this message, Mr. Liam himself acknowledges withdrawing funds without my client's consent. He also admits to using those funds to finance a trip with another woman. This is not only financial misconduct, it is marital misconduct as well." I watched Liam's face as the words echoed in the chamber. His expression shifted from arrogance to discomfort, then to anger. He whispered something harshly to his attorney, but it was too late. The evidence spoke louder than he ever could. The judge leaned forward, eyes scanning the documents. The silence stretched, broken only by the shuffle of papers. Finally, the judge spoke. "This court finds the evidence compelling. The transactions were unauthorized. The admissions in these messages are clear." I held my breath as the decision unfolded. My lawyer pressed forward. "Your Honor, we request that Kaytlyn's assets, her business, and her home be protected immediately. She has acted with responsibility. She safeguarded her own finances when she saw the warning signs. Meanwhile, Mr. Liam attempted to strip her of stability and security. The judge nodded, his tone firm. The court grants protection of the marital home and of Mrs. Kaytlyn's business and personal assets. Mr. Liam's claims to these are denied, given the evidence of misconduct. Furthermore, this court recognizes the fraudulent nature of the attempted withdrawals. The consequences of that will be addressed in due course. It was like thunder rolling across the room. The sound of justice, heavy and undeniable. I felt the air return to my lungs in a rush. For a moment, I had to steady myself because it was real now. The home I had built, safe. The business I had poured my soul into, mine. Every brick, every penny, every dream, protected. I turned my head slightly, and for the first time in months, I looked directly at Liam. Our eyes met. He expected to see fear, but what he saw was calm, composure, and something else, the quiet triumph of a woman who had refused to break. He looked away first. In that silence, I thought of the nights I had spent awake, staring at the ceiling, begging for strength. I thought of the cold meals, the excuses, the lies whispered in the dark. And now, all of it had led here, to this moment, to this victory. When the hearing ended, my lawyer leaned toward me and whispered, "You've won the first battle." And I nodded, my voice soft but certain. Yes, but not the last. I rose from my seat slowly, with dignity, my footsteps echoing against the marble floor as I left the courtroom. Behind me, Liam remained slumped in his chair, his empire of deceit crumbling around him. Outside, the sun was bright, almost blinding. I closed my eyes and let the warmth wash over me. And for the first time in so long, I felt the world open again, vast and full of possibility. Because now, I wasn't just surviving him, I was defeating him, and this was only the beginning. His fall was slow at first, then sudden, like a house collapsing once the foundations give way. The money was gone, the accounts frozen, the cards declined again and again until even he could no longer deny it. And with the money, the image he had wrapped himself in began to unravel too. The people who once admired him stopped calling. Old colleagues whispered his name only to mock it. The respect he had demanded for years dissolved into nothing more than laughter behind closed doors, and the man who once strutted with such pride now walked with his head bowed. But the cruelest blow did not come from strangers. It came from Mia. At first, she tried to stay, or perhaps she convinced herself she could endure it. The empty dinners, the shrinking bank account, the cheap rooms that smelled of mildew instead of perfume. But her voice grew sharper with every passing day. "You promised me a new life, Liam," she would hiss, her eyes cold. "You said Miami, hotels, freedom, and look at us now, stuck in this dump. You lied." And he, desperate, tried to soothe her. "It's temporary. I'll fix it, Mia. I just need a little more time." But time was not what she wanted. She wanted luxury. She wanted the dream. And Liam could no longer give it. "You're pathetic," she snapped one night. "I left everything for you, and you've given me nothing. You ruined everything." I imagined him shrinking under her words, his shoulders slumped, his voice breaking. "Please, don't leave me. You're all I have now." But she was already slipping away, first with her distance, nights spent out, calls taken behind closed doors, then with her things, vanishing piece by piece until one day she was gone. No note, no explanation, just silence where her laughter used to be. And Liam was left alone. When I finally saw him again, I barely recognized him. The man who once carried himself like a king now looked like a ghost of his former self, thinner, older, broken. His pride had been stripped away, leaving nothing but shame in its place. We sat across from one another in a small cafe. For a moment, I only studied him in silence, and when his eyes met mine, I felt no anger left inside me, only pity, a sad, quiet pity for a man who had destroyed himself. He cleared his throat, his voice trembling. Kaytlyn, I was wrong. I see that now. I regret everything. Leaving you, hurting you. I lost everything. Please, I just want another chance. I let his words linger in the air. He was begging now, begging me to save him, to forgive him, but forgiveness was something I no longer had to give. No, Liam, I said softly. You made your choices, and I made mine. There is no going back. His face crumpled, his hands gripping the table. Please, I can change. I swear I can change. Don't turn your back on me. I reached into my bag then and placed an envelope on the table between us. Inside was a small sum, not enough to rebuild the empire he had lost, but enough for him to start again if he truly wanted to. This, I told him, is the last kindness I can give you, not because you deserve it, but because we once shared 10 years of our lives. Use it wisely. But after this, Liam, you are on your own. He stared at the envelope, his eyes wet with shame. You're still helping me? After everything I did to you? I nodded. Because I loved you once, and because I refused to become what you became. His lips trembled. I don't deserve you. I never did. I rose from my seat, gathering my things. For a moment, I looked at him one last time, and all I felt was pity. Pity for the man he had chosen to become, pity for the ruins he now lived in. I hope you find your way, I said quietly, but I will not be there to guide you. As I walked toward the door, his voice broke behind me. Please, Kaytlyn, don't go. Please forgive me. Please. But I did not turn back, because some wounds do not heal, and some betrayals cannot be undone. I stepped into the sunlight, breathing deeply, my heart lighter than it had been in years. Behind me, he sat in the shadows of his own regret, and I knew with certainty his story with me was over. Mine was only beginning. After the storm had passed, I poured myself into work. The pain, the betrayal, the endless nights of doubt. I carried them with me, not as burdens, but as fuel. Every scar became a reminder that I was stronger than I thought, and with each step forward, I began to build something new. My business became my anchor. I spent long days planning, working, pushing boundaries I had once been too timid to cross. And slowly, it grew. One store turned into two. Two became three. And soon, my brand had a life of its own, bright, bold, unstoppable. Customers trusted me. They believed in what I created. And as the business flourished, so did I. I found my confidence again, the kind of confidence that does not come from another's approval, but from knowing that every success was mine and mine alone. I learned to trust myself, to rely on my own instincts, to stand tall without needing anyone to steady me. Years passed, 3 of them to be exact. And in that time, the woman who once lay awake in silence, trembling beside a man who no longer loved her, was gone. In her place stood a woman reborn, independent, proud, unshakable. Then came the day that would surprise me most. It was at a grand exhibition, one hosted by a famous brand whose name echoed across the industry. The hall was filled with lights, music, and the hum of ambition. I walked among the displays, my company now strong enough to stand beside names I had once admired from afar. And that was when I met him, Mason. He was not like the others, not loud, not arrogant, not desperate to impress. He carried himself with quiet strength, his words warm, his smile steady. There was no pretense in him, no performance, just sincerity. We spoke at first about work, products, markets, ideas, but soon the conversation slipped into something more. It felt easy, natural, like speaking with someone I had known for years instead of minutes. At one point, he looked at me with a softness that disarmed me. "You've built something incredible," he said. "But more than that, you've built yourself again. That's rare. And it's inspiring." His words touched something inside me I thought had long gone silent. For so long, I had closed that part of myself, the part that longed to trust, to feel, to love. But with him, I felt a door begin to open. I remember laughing softly, shaking my head. "You don't know the battles it took to get here." And he smiled. "Maybe not, but I can see the strength it left behind." In that moment, I realized something. The past no longer had chains on me. Liam's betrayal, Mia's cruelty, the nights of despair, they belonged to another life. One I had already left behind. With Mason, there was no rush, no illusion, just the quiet possibility of something real, something built not on lies, but on truth. As the evening drew to a close, he asked gently, "May I see you again?" And for the first time in years, I said yes. It wasn't just an answer to him. It was an answer to myself. Yes, I was ready. Yes, I could open my heart again. Yes, I could move forward, not with fear, but with hope. That night, as I returned home, I stood in front of the mirror. The woman staring back was not the same woman who had once been broken. She was stronger, wiser, and finally free. And for the first time in a long time, I whispered into the quiet, "This is a new beginning, and this time it will be mine." 2 years passed, 2 years of building, of learning, of walking taller each day. My business had grown stronger, my voice had grown louder, and my heart, it had healed in ways I never thought possible. On that day, I stood backstage at a women's conference. The hall beyond the curtain was filled with hundreds of faces. Mothers, wives, daughters, dreamers, women who had come not just to listen, but to find hope in the words of those who had walked through fire and survived. I took a deep breath. When my name was called, the applause rose like a wave, carrying me forward. I stepped into the light of the stage, the brightness washing over me, the sound of clapping hands filling my chest with warmth. For a moment, I stood silently, looking at all of them, and then I began to speak. "My name is Kaytlyn," I said softly, "and I want to tell you a story." The room grew quiet, the air still. I spoke of the past, of betrayal, of nights filled with silence and doubt, of the moment I realized the life I had trusted was built on lies. I told them about the fear, the heartbreak, the temptation to give in. But then I told them about the choice to rise instead of fall, to build instead of break, to fight not with rage, but with resilience. I saw tears glisten in the eyes of women in the audience. I heard whispers of recognition, as though my story was theirs too. And then I spoke the words that had carried me through it all. "Revenge," I said, pausing so my voice could reach every corner of the hall, "is not fire. It is not destruction. Revenge is not blood. Revenge is success. Revenge is standing tall when they expect you to kneel. Revenge is living a life so full, so free, that no betrayal can ever take it from you." The applause rose again, strong and steady, but I raised my hand gently to still it, because I had one more thing to say. I am not here today as a woman broken by the past. I am here as a woman rebuilt, independent, confident, free. And if I can do it, so can you, every one of you. The cheers that followed shook the room, and in that moment, I smiled, not just for them, but for myself. because I had become what I once thought I could never be. As the session closed, the lights dimmed. I took one last bow, the applause echoing like thunder in my chest. And then, as I turned to leave the stage, I saw him. Mason. He was standing just beyond the curtain, a bouquet of red roses in his hands. The sight of him stopped me where I stood. His smile was steady, his eyes full of the same sincerity that had first opened my heart years ago. And then, to my astonishment, he stepped forward. He knelt before me, the roses trembling slightly in his hand, the other holding a small velvet box. The hall gasped, and for a moment, time seemed to hold its breath. His voice was clear, strong, but filled with emotion. "Kaytlyn," he said, "you have taught me what strength truly looks like. You have shown me that love can be honest, steady, and real. I want to walk with you, not to save you, not to change you, but to stand beside you. Will you marry me?" The audience erupted in cheers, their voices filling the air like music. I felt tears sting my eyes, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude, of joy, of rebirth. I bent down, my hands trembling slightly, and whispered so only he could hear, "Yes, yes, Mason." He slipped the ring onto my finger, his hands steady, his smile radiant, and as he rose, the lights of the stage bathed us both in gold. For a moment, I turned back to the audience. They were on their feet, clapping, cheering, their faces alive with hope. And I knew the message had been delivered, not just through my words, but through the life I now lived. As Mason took my hand, I walked with him off the stage, the sound of applause following us like a tide. And my heart whispered the truth I had always known, even in my darkest hours. Revenge is not fire. It is not destruction. Revenge is success. And as I stepped into the next chapter of my life, I carried that truth with me, smiling with calm, with confidence, with love.